The Five Rings Podcast with Duane Rollins and Kevin Laramee on the Sport Podcasting Network. Follow us and listen to us live on Twitter at Five Rings Podcast and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network for more content.
Good day, good night. Welcome to the Five Rings Podcast. I'm Kev Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins. As always, a podcast exclusive today. Thank you for joining us on our podcast feed. Thank you for subscribing. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. We're going to have a wonderful show looking at our favorite moment of Day 12. Day 12 already. Duane, how you doing?
I'm doing well. I think that most of our listeners know that we're Canadian, so you're going to know probably what our favorite moment of this day was. Canadian winning one of the most prominent events at the Olympics. The 200 meters aren't quite the 100s in the world's eyes, but they are certainly a main event, and we got one. So we'll talk about that later. I'm sure you'll understand where we place that, and it is a fun moment for us.
So Duane just gave away the ending of the movie, so thanks for listening, and we'll be right back.
A little together.
We'll be back tomorrow on the Five Rings Podcast. But no, let's start by just talking about something else that caught my attention yesterday before we dive into the medals, Duane. The women's 400-meter hurdle, a new world record for Sydney McLaughlin, 51:46, but not even 6 seconds slower than the Norwegians' new world record, but a new world record again at the track and field. This track is fast. The hurdles are, I don't know if they're easier to jump. It's always the same height, but that track and the speed makes it for some great moments. And McLaughlin of the United States got a new world record, and it was a fun race to watch last night.
Yeah, I think the speeds, the race times are at least partly to do with the weather as well. Sprinters really like it hot because it loosens their muscles up and allows them to open up in a way that they can't sometimes if it's a little bit colder, or they run the risk of pulling things. So it is helpful in the sprint races to play in this hot weather. Now that cost benefit quickly starts going downhill. So this is still too hot, but nonetheless,
800 meters, they hate it. Like 400 is on the cusp. 800, no, they're dying at the end of that race.
Yeah, it's fine lines, right? Continue, Kevin. I've run out of things because I've been up for 40 of the last 48 hours.
Yeah, we'll talk about, of course, some more amazing moments. And yeah, another Canadian did well, Duane, on day 12. It was the first day of the decathlon and heptathlon. And I do like the fact that they're putting it at the same time. It's not 2 days of men and then 2 days of the women. It's all together at the same time, competing and giving importance to both. And you follow both during the track and field session show, or you can watch them individually. And I did enjoy watching the decathlon. 2 Canadians performing really well on the men's side after the first day. Damien Warner with a 4,722-point collection so far after day 1, after the first 5 events. We have Australian Ashley Maloney second with 4,641 points. And we have Pierce Lepage, Canadian, wrapping up the podium spots after day 1 with 4,521 points. Personal best for Pierce Lepage so far after day 1. Seasonal best for Damien Warner on multiple events on top of the 400, and also a pace that would see him over 9,000, which would be a top 3 point tally in the history of the sport.
Yeah, there's a couple big events on day 2 for Warner. I hesitate putting a half-done decathlon into medals on our tables here, but certainly this would have consideration for Poutine in most days anyway. It was a remarkable day for both of them, and to be 1-2 in an event that is maybe not as popular as it once was, but still is a marquee event, and not just the track meet, but the entire Olympics is quite remarkable. The pole vault and the javelin, that's your key. If Warner comes out of those events with any sort of anything closer than, or anything close to his PB, then you're certainly looking at what might be a fairly easy run to the. He's not a great 1500, but he's an okay 1500 runner. So like they'd have to be within 100 points or so of him by the time you get into the javelin, and then you can turn it around, because javelin is where he really struggles.
Yeah.
But
and all the contenders are falling like flies, literally. We call the German, who was surprising and did well in the World Championship in Doha, now finds himself with an injury pulling up in the 400, which was the last event of day one. You've seen other contenders like the Frenchman Maillard struggle almost all events. He did one good event so far in day number 5, and he's in trouble heading into day number 2. And he was one of the closest competitor to Damian Warner for a medal. Pierce Lepage, well, he's been dubbed the understudy of Damian Warner, also performing really well. The track really is smiling to Canadians over the last 48 hours.
Yeah, it has been. It's a remarkable time on the track for the Canadians. And look, full measure to the steeplechase, to all the Canadian athletes that ran off yesterday, even if they weren't close to a medal. They were in some very, very fast conditions, and we've seen the national record fall, I think, about 6 times in this meet already. Yeah. They're still ready to come.
And you mentioned the steeplechase. Geneviève Lalonde finished in the 11th position in the final of the steeplechase. She was the first ever Canadian woman to make it to the final of the steeplechase, which is not a small feat at all. All right, enough banter. Let's get into the medal talk. Let's start with the lumber. Let's start with the wood. And my wood, Duane, it's a bit of a funny one today. There was an article about it on the National Post here in Canada, and it's also kind of interesting. And no one thought about this when they were building it. Talking about equestrian and the obstacle course. There's always decorations next to the actual barriers, right? And it always represents countries. London, it was amazing. You had like the landmarks of the city. It's always something nice. But this time around, Duane, they put a sumo wrestler that's kind of like a big sumo wrestler that's there. And his bum is facing where the horse has got to jump. And the horses are kind of spooked by it. And they kind of stop. And we've seen more mistakes on that barriers than any other one. And there's complaints from the riders that their horse are spooked by the big spooky sumo.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit humorous, but at the same time, if you are an equestrian athlete, you would probably be a little bit peeved off it. This is not a country with a great sumo history, or not sumo. They have a great sumo history with not a great
horse
equestrian history. It's not necessarily a sport that is played there, but or a sport that's accessible just to the average people. Not a lot of people come out of the ghettos to ride a horse and jump to the bears with it. But
there's no rags to riches in the equestrian world. Is that what you're saying?
There's riches to richers. Yes.
There's riches to poor because it costs so much to have the horse. But It is interesting, though. Canadian is doing well in the first day of that competition, regardless. But yeah, that could be an issue. We'll see if the sumo survives the entirety of the competition.
Yeah, look, I will say this about the Japanese, considering everything that's been going on in this, there have not been a lot of glitches that have not been at least partly related to the weather, if not entirely related to the weather. I mean, they had some problems at the rowing venue, where else were they going to have it? This was the only logical place for it. They did a beautiful job making that place, which will have an ecological return to the country, as we said earlier on. Well, it was our very first of the day, our first show of the entire Olympics. We pointed that out. So, look, they've done a good job. It's that in any Olympics, even taking the COVID out of it, put COVID in it, they've done a remarkable job. So let's give them. As though I'm awarding a mud medal to them right now, or not mud medal, and the wood medal. I'm also telling them that they have done a wonderful job. So there you go.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, and I kind of thought it was a funny article, and my wife did too. All right, let's move on to the Poutine medal, which goes to Laurence Vincent Lapointe, a Canadian sprint canoer. She competed, and she is competing in the 200 meters C1 at the Olympic Games. First time the women are eligible to be in the sea canoe, which was about damn time. She is a legend in this sport. She's a world champion in 2010, 2011, 2011, 2013. 13, all different distances, right? She has over 10 World Championship, Pan Am champion, World U23 champion in 2013. She has a whole lot of great accomplishment on the water. Off the water, she was one of the pioneers of this sport trying to get it to the Olympics, and also has been, unfortunately, in the court system because she tested positive for a banned substance, Ligandrol, and she, for very minute traces she had in her body, and she denied taking it. So they started a whole search of how did they found these very minute traces in their system, and where did they come from? They looked at all the food that she ingested, look at all the supplement they had enough of left of the supplement she takes. They checked everything and they couldn't. Then they started to do more research, and they realized that, well, in exchange of body fluids, you can't find minute traces. And they were able to take her hair and see where in her timeline that contamination happened, and they were able to find a hair of her ex-boyfriend at that point, and they looked at it and they saw that yes, there was consumptions of Ligandrol, and they could see that a third-party bodily fluid contamination was the culprit of why she tested positive, and she was given it was taken away because it wasn't exactly. So it wasn't her fault that it was in her body, and well, she got cleared, and she's able to participate in the Olympics. It's a great story at the end, but it's also an advance of science in a way that it's a clear case of being contaminated by bodily fluids of your partner that might contain doping products.
Yeah, false positive. I said not false. I said false negative earlier. It's false positive, obviously. Yeah, that's a part of the story, and it's a part of the battle that she's had to go through multiple cycles that should have been Olympic. Like, how in hell did they take this long? Like, God, the governing body, and there's a bunch of old dumb men somewhere that, well, I don't know whether the ladies, and then eventually, the ladies go out at a world championship level and they prove that, they're not dying on the boat, because that's what the condescending reason why they would have held them back in the first place. And then they'd be, well, I don't know. There's not enough competitive athletes out there. We need more time. Well, you had 2,000 and 3,000 years of human history. We've had enough time. Just make it equal, and they have. So good. It's better late than never. So I think that it was worth pointing her out. And look, we might be talking about her again because in the 200, which she is at that point in her life for her cycle as an athlete now, that the shortest distance, she's a very powerful athlete, is probably what still gives her best chance. And if you looked at the opening heats and the way that the kayak and canoe races work, is that there's normally a preliminary heat, and the top two from those heats advance straight to the semifinals, and then the rest go through a repechage to
the quarters. The rest go to the quarters, and then go. So you have one more race if you don't finish top two of the preliminary round. You have one more race to do to get to that semifinal, which means you'll be a bit more tired. You'll have exerted a bit more energy, which is the benefit of Laurence Vincent Lapointe of doing so. Same thing for the other Canadian, Katie Vincent.
Yeah, they both won their prelims. So,
and by the way, Laurence Vincent Lapointe won by an entire length of a canoe.
Yeah, and look, that's what I'm saying. They are absolutely in with a shout to it, at the very least, to be in a final. And after the journey that this athlete's gone through, both on that false drug case, and just having to fight with a bunch of old dumb men somewhere to just be able to prove that she belongs in the highest level of sport, and she showed it. After all of that, she went out, and a lot of athletes that do that and have to do all that fight, by the time they get there, it's past. Like these women that go into these competitions where there is no Olympic option for them, like female Olympians that go into sports that have a high profile at the Olympics, still struggle to parlay that into anything real. Could you imagine being a Canadian Olympic athlete that doesn't even have access to the only podium fundings? or the Can Fund fundings. They're not eligible for them because they don't have.
Because it's not an Olympic sport.
Medals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just a World Championship sport. Well, that has changed, and it is positive. And another example of an athlete pushing the laws and the equity here for women in the sports is Mandy Bijou, who's a boxer who lost her first fight in this tournament badly, unfortunately. But because she was a mother, she missed the nationals. She missed her chance to get there. And eventually she won, and she got the opportunity to compete, and she advances the rights for women athlete. And but you're right, when you get to the match in this one, the boxing match, sometimes you exerted all your energy in the courtroom, and that's another example. But here, Laurence Vincent-Lapointe dominated her first heat.
She did, and I suspect we will see at least one medal on the water in the weekend ahead. So that's fun.
Yeah, exactly. We'll take a short break. When we come back, it's bronze, silver, and gold medal time. And we're back on the Five Rings Podcast. Kev Laramee with Duane Rollins talking about Day 12 of the Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. Day 12 already. It's bronze medal time. And this bronze medal, Duane, involves skateboarding, a great competition in the bowl. It's called the Park competition, women's park competition, with two Japanese dominating it, with Sky Brown, a multi-platform superstar at 13 years old, finishing on the third step of that podium. Okamoto got so close, but oh no, fell on her last try of a 540 in her run. But quite an amazing competition. It was compelling. It was really fun to see. And the format of it makes it that, you know what? The last rider on her last attempt, if she landed that last trick, she would have won gold. There was an amazing competition. Reminded me of my younger days watching the X Game on ESPN.
And, well, yeah, that is because it basically is the X Games at ESPN. And, you know, the youth inherited the earth is basically what that was so painfully telling those of us that have been around a long time. I can only imagine what a guy like Tony Hawk is thinking when he's sitting there watching. And Tony Hawk was there, very to his credit. And aside, there's a biography on Tony Hawk coming out in the next few months, and I will be watching that on the first night I can, because he's a fascinating character. Is there a cooler Gen X guy alive? I don't think so. So anyone above the age of, what would you have to be, 45 and over, you're Gen X now? So, yeah.
But he's so cool for so many different generations, because in the 80s, because he was a pioneer of skateboard, and then in the 90s, because of Tony Hawk Pro Skater on the PlayStation, which revolutionized the world of gaming. And then since then, it just grew.
Absolutely. Tony Hawk Pro Gaming is more like, I can only speak from my Canadian perspective here in North America, but it is, to me, has to be at least the number 1, 2, or I would say 1 or 2 most influential video games on the culture in general that there's ever been, because I think the sports video games tend to have a bigger impact because they are more closely aligned with real life than the fantasy ones. I mean, that's not to take anything away from, and I'm not a gamer per se, but that's not to take anything away from the great games that have been created there. But those are fantasy situations, whereas sports is like more of a stimulation, and that's something that Tony Hawk deserves a lot of credit for being the creative power behind that. And we're talking a lot about Tony Hawk right now, of what a 50-year-old man, when we should be talking
about 30-year-old women. But you know, this competition, of course, we're giving the bronze medal to the entire competition of the women's skateboard park event. Yosozumi, the Japanese finished first with 60.09 points. The only one to go over 60 points, Hiraki, was second with 59.04. And Sky Brown finished third with 56 and 47. A great performance. And to me, this shows that the sport deserves to be there. It was compelling. It's a different generation looking at it, but it's also different energy. The amount of camaraderie there was in this competition, it was like a good moment. It was wholesome to watch. It almost made me cry.
I also watched sports climbing last night, and if you haven't had a chance to check it out, it's also awesome in its own different way. And one of the commonalities between those two sports is how they are collective almost in a way. Like, yeah, there's a competitive element to it. I mean, in the sports case, there's literally in the name, but it's still to the athletes because they've not grown up chasing Olympic glory. They've grown up doing something they love. And that something they love has been put in the Olympics. And now they have a chance to just go out and let her rip and have some fun. And in both cases, I saw a German climber yesterday. You know, he fell off and he's trying to get to something, and he tried this big move, and he had it and fell. And, like, you know, rather than slamming and throwing, rather than, you know, Nick Djokovic.
You're right. Rather than, there's no conservative aspect. They're going for broke to the detriment of their result. Maybe they would have, like, Okamoto would have been on the podium if you had not tried something that she was not even able to do in practice. But you know what? It's about the show. Go for broke. Go all in or don't go at all. It's a different mentality. It's not like saving your energy to make sure you finish third on the competition, right? They all went for gold regardless.
Yeah, to a certain safe level. I mean, obviously, you have to keep your own mental health and physical health in mind. Although with the people that are drawn to these types of sports, what their idea of safety and mental health might be a little different than the rest of us. But yeah, it's just fun. And they're laughing. They laugh because they're having fun and they're trying things. And the American Skylar, or what's the last name? Skylar's first name. She took a ukulele out there at one point, which is...
Well, she's from Great Britain. So Sky Brown, she finished a third bronze medal. She's a ukulele artist. She's an Instagram superstar from Great Britain.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I'm mixing my teenage girls up, I guess. But the point is, they're all friends, clearly. Like, it's and that's the other part of skateboarding culture that's there is it is a cooperative sport in a lot of ways. So to find that balance that also allows them to have a competitive outlet that allows them to demonstrate and be part of the world's view consciousness every 4 years, I think is important for the sport. And I think that's why, if we could go back to our 50-year-old dude for a while, it's why ambassadors to the sport, a sport that's been counterculture for its entire history. There's, famously, there's a T-shirt that some people have sought out that's, skateboarding is a crime, not an Olympic sport, meaning that we're not the same as them. We're not sellout jocks, basically. Like, we're doing something that's incredibly athletic, but we're doing it on our terms. And I think that skateboarding has found a way to get into the Olympics so that it can be part of the global conversation in a way that it's never been before, while also not giving up a part of its soul to it. And that's incredible. And that event yesterday proved what it can be to the Olympics. And I bet that they were fun AF, as the kids say, to watch. I'm guessing that you can crank that up about 20 times when the people are going 10 feet higher tonight.
Yeah. Well, that should be another great competition. Let's move on to the silver medal for day 12. Silver medal, a competition that might be quirky, but, it's still very interesting. Talking about steeplechase, the final on the women's side, and we saw quite a compelling competition here. Canadian finished 11, the first time Canadian made the final, like I was saying earlier. Uganda, Chemutai finished first with 9 minutes, 1 second, and 45 100th. It's pretty quick to run 3 kilometers with obstacles like big hurdles, other racers, big dip, and of course, water tanks.
And look, it was a remarkable tactical race by an incredible athlete. Also, full credit to the silver medalists who knew that the only way to win that race would be to push it as hard as they could to hopefully drop it, and they did just that. But the Ugandan just had the speed and the power and the ability to continue and hold to their race plan and power through. And again, this track is fast, and I mentioned how it might not be as fast for those longer runs, for those mid runs, but the steeplechase, which is kind of the weirdest distance out there at 3,000. It doesn't exist anywhere else, but she proved that it can be fun and fast in that level too. And the Canadian in that as well finishes a national record here, another national record for the Canadian track meet in this event. Again, showing you how fast things are, and we didn't know what that extra year was going to do, and we saw it in the pool with a lot of older athletes struggling. But in the track, it seems like these athletes have tapered a little bit better for this. Maybe that's because they generally would have been preparing for a world championships this year, and that's been screwed up their timing on that. So they just have normally kind of kept in that same routine where they're normally cycled. Their cycles are slightly different is what I'm saying. And their world championships is more important than the track side to them than the world championships, I think, on the aquatic side is to them. It's not that it's not important, but the aquatics is weird because they've got your indoor events and the NCAA are big, and there's more competition going on. So yeah, it was a good race, and it was a fun race this morning. It was a great appetizer for the race that we care about a little bit more.
Yeah, and of course, Kiyang of Kenya finished third for the bronze medal in the American. Freericks finished second. She was really happy, and the Kenyan was really closing that gap, but she was able to hold on for that silver medal. The Kenyan should have just started her sprint a little earlier. Maybe would have got that silver. But it was a great competition, and a silver medal for day number 12 goes to the steeplechase competition, 3,000 meters, the women, and it was a fascinating time. Now, it's time to talk about our favorite moment for day 12, our gold medal, a moment that is historical in Canada. And a gold medal for Andre DeGrasse, 200 meters. He finished first. No one on the entirety of this planet has a longer speed sustainability than Andre DeGrasse. And imagine this, Duane. This time in the 200 meters, 10.62, is faster than Usain Bolt's gold medal time in Rio. So that's something that you can put in your pipe and smoke it. He would have piped Usain Bolt, but this is Andre DeGrasse in 2021, double medalist in Tokyo. After bronze in the 100 meters, he gets the gold in the 200.
Yeah, that time is incredible. The world record, there are legitimate conversations going on amongst people that know what they're talking about of whether Bolt has laid a marker down in the 200 that can literally never be touched by human capabilities. We'll see. I mean, whenever we thought that in the past, it's eventually fallen. But that said, we do have world records out there that are, for various reasons, very old. So yeah, that might be one. But that to get even as close as he just did today, and to actually put a time down that would have beaten Bolt in an Olympics, just tells you how good and how well DeGrasse prepared for this. And his improvements, even to, like, I have a bit of an eye for track because I did run it when I was very young, but I wouldn't call myself anything more than sort of an informed fan, right? But you can look at his form from 6 years ago and look at his form from today, and it's night and day. He used to have a very distinct running style where the left side of his body, it would move sideways on his stride. And it is incredibly difficult to train your natural running movement out of you because you just have learned, however in your life, to run a certain way. It's like changing your accent. It can be done, but it's going to take a lot of sustained exposure to the way that you want to do it or need to do it or have been evolved into doing it by based on circumstances. And he's put the work in. There's no sideways, no lateral movement at all in his stride now, which is the only thing that was holding him back in the past, because you lose time when a sprinter's energy needs to always go forward. Every single hair on your body needs to be moving forward. 6 years ago, Andre DeGrasse had 95% of his body moving forward and 5% of his body moving slightly sideways, and that 5% was the difference. Yet he was still able to break through and beat, double gold medalist here at TO 2015. Obviously, he managed to get medals in the Olympics prior and the Olympics after. So this is a guy he's an ice cold competitor when it comes to the finals. He's always got a big smile and a big laugh going on.
Yep.
But under that demeanor is a competitor that always finds a way to get to finals and get medals.
9 finals in his career in World Championships and Olympics so far, Duane. 9 medals. That's efficiency.
Absolutely. And again, that calmness too is impressive. And he saw them 100 too. I thought he had a chance at the 100. I guess he was a bronze medalist, so he did have a chance at the 100. But I do wonder whether Andre's ever going to have the top end speed to be able to compete. And that's just because his body's type's not what you typically associate with that run. He would have to completely change his training, and I don't think there's enough time in 3 years rather than 4 to do that. But I do think that if he put the focus on the 400, that he might have a better chance to do that double than he ever would to do the 1-2 double. But he does have a chance to do another double, and that is in the 4x1.
Because he's the anchor leg. And you have also Aaron Brown, who finished 6th in this final, who's going to set the table for Andre DeGrasse in that relay. And Canada has a shot. They did finish on the podium in Rio, and it's maybe one of the favorites to finish on the podium here in Tokyo also.
Yeah, I think the Americans are pretty clearly the favorite to win the 4x1, and the Jamaicans are the Americans. It's kind of like a swimming thing where the Canada's looking for a bronze there. But
it's funny how the Jamaicans have disappeared though all the way to the final. Only Dwyer, and even Dwyer wasn't anywhere close when it came down to the finishing line. So I don't know. We'll see about the Jamaicans, but yeah, usually they are there. But this year maybe
have been, though.
Yeah, the Americans.
That's an American sweep tonight. If it's not for Andre DeGrasse, so.
Exactly. You do have 3 very good competitors in Knighton, Bednarik, and of course Noah Lyles.
Absolutely, and I would put them as unless the Americans drop the baton, which is always possible. That is absolutely the case. When it comes to Canada's 4x1, they do have this. In future times, they do have sort of an ace in their back pocket, and that would be they've got another 10-1 sprinter on the track. He's in the decathlon though, so he's busy. So I don't know. They could potentially, if there was an injury or something, pull him in as well. And then we're talking about David Warner.
Yeah,
as well.
It's not going to happen, but yes, technically that's always
they could name him. There's no doubt. Like it's just he's so already he's got to focus on his event. But he absolutely, if they needed an emergency situation, they could pull him in because he's faster than some of the guys that he's absolutely faster than their 4th guy who ran I think a 10-4. So it's look, there's potential there, and I think to this end, and maybe I saw this with Donovan Bailey too, because I'm just old enough to really kind of remember Ben Johnson in a concrete way, and the reaction and the then betrayal. Perhaps in hindsight, a betrayal that was a little over the top. That we felt the betrayal. I mean, not on that end. After the drug test came back positive, all that sort of I think made Canadians reluctant to buy in completely to the sprinter when they emerge. But I wonder whether he's gonna get more attention. It's not that he gets none, but it's nowhere near what either one of the 2 Canadians prior did. And both of those 2 Canadians prior could make a strong argument that they weren't getting enough attention home as that they deserved even. And most of their money and their influence and their fame came from overseas. I just think Andre DeGrasse, because of the era he grew up in and just his personality and the lack of opportunities in this country that he's coming out of in terms of being a track-only person, has just never got the full respect that he deserves. And now he's an Olympic champion, so doesn't matter what happens from here. He will always have that as a title. He will always be an Olympian. He will always be an Olympian that won a championship, that got that laurel and the laurel in the form of the gold medal.
And we'll see Andre DeGrasse compete once again tonight, 8 p.m. men's and the women's also 4x100. The heats start, so we'll keep a close attention on that competition. We'll also keep a close attention on the rest of the activities in Tokyo. Day 13 upon us later tonight. But until then, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute, myself at Kev Laramee, and this show at 5 Rings Podcast. We'll be back live tomorrow with a video show on top of this very beautiful podcast. Thank you for your listening, and until then, have a great Olympiad.